I answered a welfare check call late one night, between 0230 and 0300, on an elderly woman who lived next door to the caller and had not been seen for some time. This night we were having a bad thunderstorm without the rain. I get to the complainant's house to speak with her first, wondering why she called at this time. She tells me that the lady next door is in her 90s, lives alone, and she's not seen her in weeks. She explained that she has called, went over, knocked on her door, but the lady will not answer. I start thinking she is probably deceased and has been for some time. The car has a 3-inch layer of dust on it. The mail is piling up, and there are no lights on. First, I walk to the side door and knock on the door with my flashlight. Knocking loud enough, an elderly person with some hearing problems should be able to hear it easily. After a few minutes of no response, I turn around and walk to the backyard, looking at the windows to find if everything's okay. The caller is with me now, and she is saying she doesn't know any relatives of the lady. Again, all signs are leading that this lady is probably deceased. I walk to the front of the house and notice that her blinds are up on the front windows, and now I can see a glow from inside. However, I'm not tall enough to look into these windows, which are probably about 7 feet off the ground. The caller runs next door and grabs a bucket for me to stand on. I get on the bucket and bingo, I can see into the living room. The glow was from a TV, which was on a blue screen and is bright enough that I didn't need my flashlight to see inside. I looked at the first floor to make sure she had not fallen. Couch, recliner, everything was empty. The telephone home base was blinking red with the missed calls and voicemails from people. From the living room, there was a hallway that was dark and I couldn't see down it. Using my flashlight, I could see an open door down that hallway. Still no signs of life. I turned around and told the caller that everything looked okay and nothing really looked disturbed. I turned back, and an elderly woman is looking at me with her face right up to the glass. I couldn't breathe. It felt as if I'd been hit in the chest by a bat. I fell backward and off that bucket. I hit the ground really hard, and the caller rushed over to me. I pushed her off as she was trying to help me up, and I ran back up onto the bucket. My heart was pounding, but I had to see. Instinct had my hand on my gun, and the other was up on the window. I looked back inside and saw a frail elderly woman standing in the hallway wearing a long nightgown, with her back to me. She turned her head to the side and looked at me out of the corner of her eye, and then slowly walked out of view down that dark hallway. For some reason that unnerved me. I got down and looked at the caller again, who was standing there with a puzzled look on her face. All I could say was, okay, I saw her. But now the wind had picked up, and it began to rain. I walked back to my car by the road, turned back to the caller and said, "Don't come back here." Got inside my cruiser and drove back to the police department. I never found out about the lady who lived there. The complainant didn't call back, and the house now apparently has different tenants inside. Some things are better left alone. My old roommate's dad was a former naval officer, and then an FBI agent, 20 years in the Navy and 12 to 15 years or so in the FBI. One of his strangest stories was from his FBI days. It was a kidnapping case. This girl disappeared from her parents' RV sometime between 5 p.m. and midnight. They were up front, and next thing they know, she's gone. She was supposed to be sleeping in the back, one stop at a rest stop, and then back into heavy traffic. So they figure she must have popped out the door at some point. This is near the California-Nevada border. So he meets them, talks to them, and this is within a day or so, and the girl's still missing, no sign of her. The local police department theorized she ran off because she's 15 and wants to get away from her lame grandparents for the summer. There was a busted window, and the glass was on the inside of the vehicle, so we're treating it like a possible kidnapped person. After a few hours, there's a couple of different theories on the case. The obvious one is that she ran off. The other is that she got snatched up by someone. No one's seen her in almost 2 days now, and disappearing in the desert for a young girl is tough. Next thing you know, we get a phone call. There's a naked girl, lost and confused, picked up by some trucker on a 2-lane road out there called Nipton, and it runs into I-15 between Barstow and Vegas somewhere, right near the border. She matches our description. Me and 3 other guys head out there to meet with the sheriff who's got her. Sure enough, it turns out that she's our girl. She's fine. No rape, no bruises, no exposure. Nothing. Completely healthy. Completely fine. Even clean, like she took a shower. And she won't tell us a damn thing because she doesn't remember anything. According to her, one minute she's in the RV, the next she's naked walking down the side of the road in 100-degree heat. We talked to her for 2 hours while her grandparents headed out to pick her up. We then had a lady from social services talk to her. Nothing. I've seen my fair share of people hiding things, and to me, she definitely didn't seem like she was. She honestly and genuinely just didn't remember. It's the damnedest thing. Anyways, the girl was found. She was fine. So we turned it back over to the local police department to figure out what happened and determine if charges were to be pressed at all. I kept in touch with a guy I knew there because I was curious and we were in a fantasy football league together. A few months pass and he tells me the parents sent the girl to a therapist to look for repressed memories, just to make sure she wasn't raped or anything. Therapist says she seems fine and honestly has no recollection of her time at all. She said there's not much point in delving any further since she has no symptoms and is largely more confused by the reaction than the actual event. So to this day, we've got a busted RV window with glass on the inside, likely from a moving RV on a jam-packed freeway, in broad or lightly fading sunlight with 0 witnesses. A 15-year-old girl gets out or is taken out and is taken somewhere safe nearby for almost 2 days, then is stripped naked without being touched sexually, cleaned up, then deposited on the side of a separate road a few miles away. She didn't have any drugs in her system that we could detect. Remembers nothing at all. And nobody knows what happened to her clothes or anything. It's been almost 20 years since this event, and I can't figure out what the hell went on with that girl. It still bugs me at night that I have no way to explain it aside from she was lying the whole time. I know liars though, and I bet money that she wasn't lying at all. I've seen a lot of things in my career, things that would make a citizen doubt my sanity, from being dispatched to chase a UFO to responding to calls of ghosts. But the most unusual thing that happened to me was witnessed by several officers and a dispatcher. One evening, I'd brought in a guy for domestic violence and he was a bit rowdy. I was joined in booking by the sergeant and another patrolman. I'm in the process of booking Mr. Tough Guy when I glanced into cell number 1. There was a guy in there, short haircut, glasses, and a white t-shirt just staring at us. I ignored him because I didn't want him to start banging on the window, demanding a phone call or something. So I finished the booking process and escort Mr. Tough Guy to his cell. Walking past cell number 1, the guy in the cell just stood there, never said a word or moving. We all then leave booking and just go about our business. Sometime later, Sergeant asked me to check the paperwork for the prisoners, to see if they were ready to transport them to county jail. I grab the paperwork and go into booking to do a head count. Cell 1 is empty. I panic. I tell the sergeant, who also panics. And he and I begin making phone calls to detectives to see if they had moved the guy or had released him. They all say they didn't go into booking at all that night. I then check the computer and paperwork again. The head count was accurate. No one had been placed in cell number 1. We go to the dispatch office to check the surveillance video for booking. We rewind the footage to see where I can be seen booking my prisoner. We then fast forward to the point in the video where we all walk out. As soon as we walk past the door, the guy in number 1 blinks out of existence. We were all seriously freaked out by this. When we tried to transfer the video to a DVD and USB drive, the guy in the cell did not appear. We still hear and see stuff every now and then, and prisoners in the detox tank can occasionally be seen talking to someone in the direction of cell number 1, even though it appears empty. To this day, I'm still very weary of going into booking alone. got a report of a missing husband. He told his wife and family of 6 children that he was going to get his tire changed, but never returned. And this was 12 hours ago. They had purchased another house in a neighboring community, and the relationship with the wife was under pressure. So the wife assumed he was staying at the other house and claimed he would never kill himself. The strange thing about this report, though, was that he emptied his personal bank account into his wife's this morning as well. The wife explained this off, saying that they had recently had a fight about finances, and he agreed that he was bad at money and maybe they should just have a joint account that she controls. On a hunch, I asked a 14-year-old boy if there were any areas in the mountains nearby that his father enjoyed going. The son identified a road about 10 miles away. It was nearing midnight, but I decided to drive to the top of this old abandoned Forest Service road. As I drove through the snow and started to climb the road, I felt a gut feeling that I would 100% find this guy up there, either thinking about to or had already committed the act of suicide. The snow-laid gravel road had some sign of travel, but no real indication of how fresh the vehicle tracks could be. As I reached the top of the road, after an hour of travel, I was honestly surprised that I did not find his black truck. I spent the drive back down thinking about gut feelings and how they're unreliable, and I somehow felt different about this one. As I continued down this road, I did notice over a dozen smaller roads branching off, but none of them were mapped, and I'd already spent too much time on a single occurrence in a busy city with too few police officers. Nonetheless, I decided to check a single one of these secondary roads, and about 3/4 of the way down, I picked a road at random to check. Sure enough, my headlights lit up the back of a black truck about 100 yards past the first corner. Even if I hadn't memorized the license plate beforehand, I wouldn't have to run it. This was clearly his. I radioed that I had found the truck, parked my vehicle, and walked the 20 feet to his truck with my heart beating like I was doing it at a sprint rather than at a normal walk. What I found inside was a mess of brains and blood, caused by a self-inflicted shotgun wound under the chin. I'll save you from the description. There was just something about that gut feeling while traveling up this abandoned and quiet mountain road, followed by a sense of being tricked by the gut feeling, then finding out it was true by discovering a gruesome scene. Having to wait 3 hours next to his truck waiting for body removal, then to end it all by having to go to his family who was expecting good news, and then having to deliver the worst news possible. It all still makes me feel creeped out to this day. I responded to a call of an unresponsive infant. When I arrived, all the family members were standing around casually in the front yard pointing into the house. I found the baby in the back room lying on her back on a bare mattress. I started CPR, but realized the baby was probably already deceased. We rushed her out to the arriving ambulance, hoping that they had a way to bring her back. I learned this was the mother's second suspicious SIDS death, and I had her other children removed from her care. The difficult part was when I left the scene and went to the ER to see what came of the situation. As I walked in and asked where she was, an ER nurse walked over to me and handed me the deceased baby, swaddled in a blanket, and told me to wait for someone to show me to the morgue. So I'm just standing there in uniform, holding what everyone thinks is a live infant, or rather an infant corpse. Several people stopped by wanting to see her and commenting on how cute it is to see an officer holding a baby. I just smiled, and it killed me on the inside. I was ushered back to the morgue after what I felt like was an eternity, and told I had to wait with the baby until the medical examiner arrived. I took the blankets off and laid her on a stainless steel gurney, then left me alone with her once again. I lounged around the morgue for about an hour waiting. By the time I got home, several hours after the end of my shift, I just laid down in my bed and cried. My young daughter was in daycare and my wife was at work. I really just needed to hold them both, so the house felt incredibly empty. My daughter was only slightly older than that infant, and when I was looking at her earlier, I kept seeing my own daughter. I didn't get any sleep at all before going back in for the next shift later that night.